it was like from being just totally excited and ready to play.
I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a tie game. There, I mean,
initially when we figured out that he was saying it was no good,
the clock was ticking and Darren had enough time to turn, but one bounce on the floor.
I think it was good. I think the referee's fault. We should have hung him that night. And if we'd got to him, we would have.
I think we got cheated out of a ball game. I don't think it, I know it.
Small towns have big stories. Some are passed from generation to generation, and some are forgotten. Sometimes these stories are fiction and are made to, on some level, scare people into listening. But at times, there are stories that are true and have a lesson to be taught. These stories may be as old as the town, or maybe as old as the person telling them, but one fact still remains. No matter where you're from, there's always a good story to tell. As of late in this small town, football fever has infected everyone, especially during the area era. But before football was ever the town's sport, another sport reigned supreme over its inhabitants. Basketball was the game, and one team would make a mark on Willow Springs that would never be forgotten. But as with any other story, it's best to start from the beginning.
Harold Smith, the superintendent at Willow Springs, came to the high school that I was coaching at, Wablo, with that in mind. And along the way, interestingly enough, that fourth grade group did become the team that finished third in the state and of course runner-ups their senior year. So it was a little bit of prophesying perhaps, and in between we had some great teams and some great players.
Well, I can remember when they were seventh graders that we knew or felt like right off the bat that they were a pretty special group because of a couple of things, the talent and then the numbers. We had quite a few of them and felt like that they were a special group and, you know, could do great things. Their seventh grade year, I remember our first game was at Thayer, and I believe at the end of the first quarter we were ahead like, I don't know, 18 or 20 to nothing. And that was a pretty good tip-off that we had a good group right there. And in their seventh grade year, then they didn't lose a game. Eighth grade year, we lost one game by 1 point. I believe it was in the Houston tournament. Missed a layup, I believe, and at the end of the game we could have won it. But that's the only game that they lost. In their freshman year, they were undefeated, although some of them played up on the junior varsity and the varsity, so they weren't together completely. But that kind of tells you how good their bench was with the number of players they had. They didn't lose a game when Matt Young coached them their freshman year. So they lost one game in 3 years, junior high.
The players that made up that 81 team, of course, everybody remembers Steve Coatney and Steve Worley, Darren Taylor, Mark House, and Joy Brasier. Those were the first five. I think it would be fair to say they got most of the playing time. And then in the second group, and I say second group affectionately because that second group probably would have been one of the better teams in the SCA that year. As a matter of fact, they gave the first group some challenges throughout the course of the year in the practice, but that would have been Ray Cook and Matt James and Barry Newman. That would have included Tim Woodring in the middle and the McEllier boys at guard. At the state tournament, Gary Gotze joined us, and Todd Cooper was the manager. Now, I think about a couple of things. As I mentioned those names, I think about what a great shooter Darren Taylor was, what a great power forward he was for that team, and I think about Mark House, another great shooter. I think about Steve Coatney and Worley, how competitive they were. I think about the Houston tournament when Coatney wasn't guarded because the coach didn't think that he could shoot the ball, and he commenced to hit 5 out of 7 and literally win the game for us. And it was a close contest. And I think about Matt James, how we say players will run through a wall for you, and he literally did that one night, as a matter of fact, put his arms out in pursuit of a player to stop at the wall, and his arms gave way, and his head hit the wall, and his teeth popped out on the floor, and we carted him off to the dentist. So what an outstanding group of young men.
Well, we were just starting to develop. I mean, we were just getting to know each other real good after 2 years of playing 7th and 8th grade ball. We went undefeated that year. Remember that. That's a long time ago. Remember, that was when I really was able to start really jumping and dunking, and Darren was just getting into his shot. We had Gary Brand at the time. Of course, he moved away, but we were solid.
This was them, the group of guys that would put themselves aside and define the word team as they progressed. But there was another man who played a big part in the Bears' success. Although he wasn't on the team officially, he was treated as an equal and was with them every fleeting moment. This man's name was Sambo Hines.
Sambo Hines was a very important part of our success. And I think it would be in the emotional standpoint, the compassion that Sambo had for the team was inspirational, and it demanded a return of like compassion. He had the ability to draw from the players at Willow Springs, the Bears as he called them. He had the ability to draw compassion because of the love that he had for the team. And to watch him interact with the young people and how he would adopt literally all the players who would show any kind of reaction to him, and he was so very important. He went to, as everyone knows who was there at the time, he went to all the games with us, sat on the bench with us. He was always dressed and ready to go, and our #1 fan. So he was of great importance, and if he wasn't there, everyone wanted to know, where's Sambo? Can't leave without Sambo, and generally we didn't have to worry about that because the Fergusons made sure, and Sambo made sure that he was there.
Well, as far as Sambo goes, I can remember 2 or 3 things about Sambo. One is he always had a secret ink pen that he talked on, didn't know who he was talking to a lot of times, but he'd get that thing out and start talking to him. I can remember probably the big thing with Sambo is he was like clockwork at a certain time every day. He'd always be there, and he'd always been sorting pop bottles whenever he got there. He'd been working. Anytime you asked him what he's been doing, he's been working. And probably the big thing is with Sambo is that we didn't ever lose. The Bears never lost, and the St. Louis Cardinals never did lose. If you ever asked Sambo, how'd the Cardinals do last night? They won. That was things I remember. And then, of course, just what he meant to everybody. His always smiling, always, messing around with the guys, rubbing their head, rubbing his belly. He was an inspiration to everybody. Just his great personality and his his positive outlook on life, and to have him around was always very special. I know that if you were from Willow Springs and somebody else didn't know who he was and looked at him funny, or maybe wanted to give him a hard time, they'd better hope that nobody from Willow saw it, because they wouldn't be standing. And it was just how the town took to Sambo was just unbelievable. He was Willow Springs. I think that's just the way to put it. Sambo was Willow Springs.
Coming to my party. Hey, Bo. Okay, come on then. Come on, Bo. Hello, Bo. Welcome to our house, Bo. Welcome to your birthday party. Come on, Bo. Come on in. Craig's coming, yeah. Craig's coming. Come on in. You know what? The Bears came and brought you presents. Can you believe that? Little bitty of that. Good, Sam. What's in there, Bo? What? Let's see. Holy cow, Bo. Big Smith? Look at that. Look at this. Will you look at that, Bo? Oh, those are nice. Look at that. Hey. That's Dwayne. Yeah. Look at that. Bo, think of this.
He's one of a kind. I guarantee you that. Never be another one like him.
The young 4th grade team that caught Coach Stanfield's eye would impress not only him, but the town itself as they came into high school. During their freshman year, the team would be undefeated and perfect their skills as they matured.
This was a team more than it was individuals. But all teams have players that assume certain responsibilities on the team to allow it to experience success. Collectively, they were a hard-working group. Collectively, they were willing to accept responsibility for their efforts. Defensively, they worked very hard and became in my opinion, a very good defensive basketball team.
They were very competitive, and if you're going to be very good in athletics, no matter what you do, you're going to have to be real competitive, and those guys didn't like to lose at anything.
What did your first loss feel like?
It felt bad, you know, it really did. And what I can remember about the times we did lose is just thinking until the final buzzer sounded we were going to win the game. We always had that faith that we would come through and win, and you know, that doesn't always happen. Doesn't always happen in life, but it is a good feeling to go in with the belief that you will win. So.
But we need to lose. You have to lose to know what it feels like, so you don't want to feel it again.
What were your thoughts at the first game of the 79-80 year?
We were excited, you know. We were excited for the guys that were seniors. We were just excited and knew that we had a shot to go to state. So.
You know, we had the expectations that we were going to have a good team. I think that I don't think we expected at that time when had Willow Springs ever been at the Final Four. I'm sure that we weren't thinking about Final Four at the time. We were probably thinking about hoping that we competed well in the conference and the district and had a chance to win our district. And I don't think at that point, I don't think Willow Springs had won a district basketball championship. I think probably since maybe in the 50s they won a regional, I believe.
We had a plan. We were going to state. That was our plan. We thought we could, we knew we could, and we worked for it.
I just kind of remember that a couple of our seniors that I felt like stepped up and played well at the end, Greg Allison and Lynn Jones, that made a difference in our team. And then we just really found a way to win the close games, I think, up at that end that got to that point. But there again, that was uncharted territory for us. So we hadn't been there before and didn't really know what it was like, and they responded and really made some big baskets and big plays in close games.
At that particular point in time, that program had not experienced postseason play. We've had some championship play. We've had a good year or two in the interim, and we've had graduations like everybody. But they had not experienced postseason play to the degree that we were about to.
That was cool. You know, they were chartering buses for us to ride on, and the community was behind us, and it was on the radio, and you know, for a bunch of kids from a little town, great.
Probably falling short is not the right explanation. We ran into a team that was, on the night we played them, a little better than we were. It's not that we couldn't have beaten them, but that was one of those games that I thought we played well and lost. And Joe Klein had something to do with it, and he was something of a challenge for us to overcome, just from the standpoint of his size, his frame. I thought that our 6'3" center, Joey Brasier, playing against that size of a young man was quite a disadvantage. Interestingly enough, Joey performed outstandingly.
I don't know that the team fell short. There was a lot of good competition. I mean, when you run up against a guy like Joe Klein, you know, and teams like that, you run up against some pretty good basketball players.
What'd you think when you saw Joe Klein?
Oh man, that was one physical specimen of a guy. I mean, you know, we played against some big guys, but he not only was tall, he was big, and he was physical, and he was just capable of doing about anything.
What'd you think when you saw him with the Chicago Bulls?
Oh, that was neat, you know, to say, hey, I stood on a basketball court with that guy. So.
We achieved a goal, but didn't get to the next step that we wanted to get. I mean, look, we lost to Slater. You know, they had Joe Klein. I mean, he was a big person. I mean, he was big. But I also felt like after the game that we could have beat him. We were in awe and, you know, amazed at his size, where we were at, our first trip. I mean, we were just glad to be there, but we also wanted that final championship game. So actually, I don't think we fell short. We were just overwhelmed.
Joe Klein was in that game. Any memorable plays or anything you can think of?
You know, and just the whole thing. I mean, I was in awe most of the game of watching him. You know, I was used to seeing Joe dominate everybody in the post position, and you know, it was pretty hard to dominate him, Joe Klein. So.
What was the most memorable moment from the Willow versus Slater game?
Him taking 3 of us to the basket and dunking on us. He was awesome. He was a big old boy.
After feeling the championship game at their fingertips during the 79-80 season, the Bears worked not only physically but mentally to prepare themselves for the next year.
What did the team do the summer before the 80-81 season? You know, anything? Prepare-wise?
You know, what I really remember about our preparation, the gym was always open. Coach Stanfield was there, and he wanted people up there shooting, practicing, you know, and we just knew if we were going to be a good team that we had to be there and do those type of things. So.
I remember we did nothing different than we had done in any previous year. We worked hard. We had summer camp. The thing that we had going for us was experience. We were able to learn from our experience. We made mistakes as juniors, and we learned from our mistakes, and then we were able to learn from those mistakes, which became experience. And I would say with 11 seniors and 1 junior, and that's very unusual, and to have that many upperclassmen on a team. And somebody asked me, more than one person, as a matter of fact, aren't you going to cut some of those and so you can make way for some younger players? And I didn't have it in my heart, nor would I have. There's no way that I was going to cut those young men that bled, and besides that, who would you cut? They were all contributors.
As the team walked onto the floor of their final season, they had only one goal in mind: to get back to state.
Well, my thoughts was that, man, we've got a lot of things going for us and a lot of reason to be very optimistic that we're going to have a super season. And probably more of the less, we're thinking, you know, we hope we don't get anybody hurt, we don't go through sickness, that type of thing. And if we can stay away from the injuries and the illness, that we're going to have a great chance of doing some really special things.
Yeah, that really was a special season because, you know, we knew that was going to be our last year and our last chance, and we'd really all thought about that since being in grade school. And just to walk out and think, okay, this is it, this is the run to the state championship, that was, you know, I think it was more fun in 79 and 80. I think in 80 and 81 there was some pressure there, and, you know, none of us wanted to mess up. So.
Well, I think as it progressed, I think expectations were very high. I think anything we did that year, we expected to be successful and win. Whether it was the blue and gold, or whether it was a tournament, or whether it was a conference, or the district, or whatever it was, I think expectations were very high, and I think anything less than winning would have been, you know, unheard of. That we just expected to win everything that we did. Whatever game we played, whatever level it was, we expected to win.
During the season, the Bears plowed over their competition and marched into the blue and gold tournament undefeated.
I don't really remember too much about the early games. Obviously, I remember the championship game a little bit. I know that we were playing Willard in the championship game. I believe that we were seeded number 1, Willard was seeded number 2. I do remember the fact that the big question in the coaching standpoint that game was they had a kid about 6'6", 6'7", and something. I think his name was Robertson, that we thought was pretty good. They had another really good guard named Harsler, Kirk Harsler, I believe was his name, that was really an outstanding player. And I know that we were really trying to decide how we were going to guard the postman in that game, and we didn't think when we'd seen their postman play that he really scored that well. And we thought we could play beside him or behind him, and he just had a field day on us. I remember right, he scored 20-some points, and just really played well, and he hadn't shown that up to then. So that was kind of the thing I remember there. And of course, Willow Springs had never been in a championship game, I don't believe, in the blue and gold tournament, so that made it a special game too.
For once, we thought we might have a chance. I think that last game we had to play. Now we played it early. We had to play a morning game at 9 o'clock. That just couldn't function. I felt out of sync in that game. I think most of the guys did too, but it was blue and gold was tough. I mean, that's top level competition from around the area. But it just didn't happen. I mean, it's one of them ruts you get into in the middle, you know, start of the year. You got to dig your way out, and I think we did.
When I was at Willow Springs, my memories of the blue and gold were good in the sense that we got good competition, but we didn't win. But I felt that philosophically it was a good move for us because it got us into some different competition, some good competition, and allowed us to go back to the drawing board, and as a result of that, to get better. And that's essentially the objective of the blue and gold. If you can't go there, play, and get better, then you shouldn't be going.
Following the blue and gold tournament, the Bears went back into their regular season schedule. During this time, they only lost one more game, to the Mountain Grove Panthers. By the end of the season, the Bears had only lost 2 games. The record placed them number 1 as they went into districts. The Bears won the first 2 games and went to the most memorable game ever played in the Mumford Gymnasium, against the undefeated Alden Comets.
Districts is the gateway to postseason play, so it becomes extremely important. That's really what the season is all about. is to progress to the point where you're playing your very best basketball at the end. And I honestly believe that in all cases we were. And that year, certainly we were. We had a formidable task. The Alton Comets, as history has recorded, was a very well coached team. Marvin Vestal was their coach. They were undefeated. Well deserved of that ranking that they had in the state at that time. And here we were meeting on our floor, fortunately, for the rights to go to state tournament.
When you say districts, all you think about is Alton. Shoot, that one particular game brings back a multitude of memories, probably for everyone. Of course, everybody remembers the crowd, how quick the gym filled, how there was, you couldn't tell where the aisles were at. You had people on the stage that were stacked, I don't know how many, one behind the other, standing and watching. The hallway was full of people. People were sitting on the walkway behind our bench. It's just unbelievable the number of people that were in the gym. And then the fact that they had to lock the doors, and you know, depending on who you talk to, you usually hear people say there was 200 or 300 people outside that didn't get in. I don't know how many there was, but there was several people that didn't get into the game. I remember that. I remember, you know, it's one of those games that when the tip-off finally came, they was standing and cheering before the game ever started. Those things come to my mind. Just the atmosphere. It was just, of all the years I've been involved and coaching and playing, I don't think I've ever been a part of a game like that as far as how the atmosphere was. It was just unbelievable. The build-up to the game was just unreal.
It was just unbelievable, the number of people in that gym. And I remember walking out on the floor and just the sound of the people there and the total, you know, just people everywhere.
The crowd, my goodness, what a crowd. The Alton game was phenomenal. So many people. I know Steve Worley and I, we had to drive down through the country backside over there by the softball fields behind the gym, 300 yards away, just to get a parking spot.
I remember that they came in with buttons on their shirts saying, "We believe," and our people had, learning that, had made buttons that said, "We know," and the "We believes" and the "We knows" battled it out for 32 minutes.
There was everything in the book that could be pulled that night. The charges, the whatever you could think of, it was pulled. It was nip and tuck the whole way. And for a while I was scared. Taylor Coatney played the game of his life. He actually played the game of his life that night. They were going to make him shoot it out, either win it to lose it, and he won it.
After the win over the Comets, the Bears advanced to quarterfinals and won both their games, which took them into the Final Four. Their hard work would soon pay off as they battled with Hallsville to get to the state championship.
felt like we had a great shot at being state champions after that game. Felt like that, you know, that we were in a good position, obviously, if you're getting ready to play that game, and that we had a great chance after we beat Hallsville. Just really there again, like I said, I think we expected to win. You know, anything less, we weren't going to accept, and we felt like that we were going to win, and that we were preparing to win, and we had been playing well enough that we were going to have a great shot at winning.
Well, it was a big game because it was the entry game into the state championship, and it was probably, my emotions were great satisfaction, but also keen anticipation. There isn't a lot of transition time between the last game and the next game when you're in state play, because it's a day-to-day thing, and immediately your thoughts go to preparation for the next game. We already have tapes and scouting report in advance, and my attention immediately went to the next game, and that became the format. But there's a constant feeling of great satisfaction that is beyond description that keeps coaches in the business, because it's addictive, because you know that your teams played well, and indeed, if you observed that, and I did, they performed well under great pressure, and I was extremely proud of them.
Really, I was surprised how easily we beat Hallsville, quite honestly. I mean, it was, I don't remember the exact score, but it was 10 or 12 point spread, and I didn't expect that. They had a big man. He was 6'10", 6'11", but Joe handled him real well, and actually became friends with him after he went to school at SBU, and great guy, but we got along pretty well with Hallsville.
I remember that we practiced, because you did get a practice time. I don't remember anything specific that we did against this team, North Penobscot. I do know that Coach Stanfield was very thorough, so I'm sure that anything that we had picked up, the thing they did on offense, or that we probably worked to try to stop. But I don't remember anything specific other than that. I know that you know, you don't have much time to prepare anyway, because you play one day and then the next day you're playing in the championship game, so you don't really have a lot of time to do a lot of preparation.
Well, it's a dream of all teams, all coaches, to be in the position that we were in. And it was, in our description at least, it was an electric atmosphere. We had a large contingent of people, and there were a large contingent of people there for other games that some might argue, but we felt like we had a tremendous amount of support from that crowd in Hearns on that particular game, and drew strength off of it. And I thought we played well. I didn't think that it was the very best game that we had played, but I felt that as I was watching, my thoughts were that this is what they've worked for from the 4th grade. I remember contemplating that. My wife and I had talked about it, as a matter of fact, before the game. That very circumstance where when I came home and I said 4th grade's pretty good. And here they were in a state championship game, so it was a realization for me of a dream, and for each of them.
And the other guard, the Willow Springs Bears, a senior in 6'1", number 24, at the forward position.
Okay, pause. Now let's analyze what's going on. North Pemiscot got ahead by 2 points. There were 6 seconds left on the shot clock. Steve Worley rolls the ball up to half court where Steve Coatney is. Now keep in mind the timer does not start until the player touches the ball. Also note that when the player touches the ball and the scorekeeper pushes the button for the timer to start, there's a half-second delay before it actually starts. So when Coatney picks up the ball and drives it up court, the clock is going, and by the time he passes it to Taylor under the basket, Taylor shoots the ball. The ball touches the glass. Then the timer runs out, making the ball still in play. And the referee says it's no good. That's the situation. Now let's look at it with our added timer in the right-hand corner. Now keep in mind the second Coatney touches the ball, the timer will start.
It was a game that saw us jump to the lead in the early going, trail at halftime, and ultimately, as so often we envision, we fall behind and we catch up. I think with 24 seconds remaining, the ball game was tied, and then North Pemiscot scored with 6 seconds, and that pretty well sets the stages for the last shot. We had a timeout. Our objective was to push the ball down the floor as quickly as possible and then to get as good a shot as possible. And it was pretty consistent with my philosophy, is not to try to run something set from the simple standpoint that they take away the options and people begin to tighten up. And it was almost magical. The thing that Coatney did the best, he pushed the ball. The thing that the rest of the players did the best was they made good decisions. Darren Taylor was on the weak side of the floor. He flashed to the ball almost immediately under the basket. And Coatney had the presence of mind to not wet his pants at that particular point in time, but to make a good pass. The pass landed perfectly in Darren's hands, and the clock is ticking, and Darren had enough time to turn, put one bounce on the floor, square to the basket, and shoot. The ball was on the glass, and at that particular point in time, we heard above the roar of the crowd, we thought we heard a gun go off. The ball was on the glass, and it gently dropped through the hoop, and there was pandemonium. And amidst all that pandemonium, there was also an official at the head of the key by the name of Darren Meyer, who at that point in time was waving his hands, and all coaches know what that means at the end of the game. And that meant that that shot was not going to count, and therefore the Bears had lost. And it was an extreme disappointing moment, especially in the lives of 17, 18-year-olds. And it was not the way that we had dreamed it, but it was a reality. It was that part, the luck part, that we had no control over. It was unfortunate, but it was the way it happened.
Initially, when we figured out that he was saying it was no good, I felt like they would go to the scores table and check with the scores table to see if, you know, they heard the gun go off, and because it was that close, to see what those people thought. But then when I saw him running for the exit, then it kind of hit me then, and you know, that I was in shock that there's not going to be any kind of appeal or a discussion about whether the shot was good or not. That they decided it was going to be no good, and once they left the floor, that there wasn't going to be any change in the call.
We knew that once the official runs off the floor by virtue of the rules, as a matter of fact, once that officially ends the game. They're supposed to sign the book, but they had already taken care of that, and there are all kinds of issues there, but it's, as I've described over the years, one of those circumstances in life that is not fair, but one that which we have to learn to deal with. And it was a very bitter pill, but nonetheless, it was a reality. The unfairness to me was that I, in the profession I'm in, would have other chances, and was fortunate enough, as a matter of fact, later to have won a state championship. But those young men, that was their chance, and that was the unfairness of it.
Oh, that was just, you know, it was like from being just totally excited and ready to play overtime to I can't believe, you know, that this is happening. So it was just from total joy to total just feeling terrible. Play overtime to I can't believe, you know, that this is happening. So it was just from total joy to total just feeling terrible.
I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a tie game. Darren, I mean, I actually thought we might have won the game because I thought he got fouled. I mean, that's just... I really felt like it would have been overtime. We'd have had it made then.
Then we all loaded home, and it was good to have Bo back on the bus because, you know, he couldn't really go with us and stay with us, and that was a little unusual for us because the bus didn't leave without, Bo on the bus. He was at every game, so it was nice to have him back.
The disappointment, the pain, however you want to describe it, however unimportant it is compared to, for instance, a war in Iraq. At that time, it was very real. It was very difficult. There were a lot of tears. It was a broken dream, but it was going to get better, and I knew that. I had the advantage, of course, of years, but it was devastating. But it's something that the Willow Springs people, as a matter of fact, that crowd was very embracing. But the Willow Springs people always met us on the highway, and they lined the cars up and waved. And when we got back to the gym, there were a throng of people. I don't want to put a number on it, but there was hundreds, I want to say. And it was very inspirational. Each one of the kids, I think, really felt good. I've looked at those pictures, and even then there were tears in some eyes, but they had much to be proud of and should have been.
After the game, tears. Dumbstruck, I don't know what you want to call it. Disappointment, felt like we'd let the town down, let ourselves down. Ride home, that was a 2-day trip.
I mean, there were people lined up from the bypass all the way to the gym. So that was really neat. Just a tremendous amount of community support. And it was fun.
You're thinking, how did this happen in the championship game? You know, and the thing that went through my mind is you watch a lot of basketball games and you see a lot of close games. You see games where officials, you think, count baskets that probably were after the horn went off. You know, it's close, but if it went in, they're going to count it. But I've never seen one that was obviously good that was was not counted. That's the first time I'd ever seen that, really, that it had happened in that. So that's what I kept playing in my mind, the fact that, you know, this didn't really happen, especially in a state championship game, but, you know, it really did.
No. Disappointed. Wondering what if I'd have done this, or wondering if I'd have done that. You know, if we'd have made this basket or that free throw. You always wonder.
When you wake up the morning after a great win, your feeling is indescribable, because you put so much into creating something that becomes a realization. And then when something like that happens, it's like the party just didn't happen. There's a damper that, for whatever reason, it's that worst day that you can imagine, where everything seems to be going wrong. When you wake up, that's the way you feel. So that would be the way I would describe it. It's like, I can't believe I had that kind of a day. And my thoughts would always go back to the kids.
Actually, for a lot of reasons. I mean, we had a couple of other reunions. It was the 20-year reunion. I knew that I probably wasn't going to be coaching that much longer, and I wanted to make sure that those guys were honored at some point. And I felt like, you know, when I retire, then the next person that comes in, you know, they weren't around, and they may not get their what we call a reward, or they wouldn't get their time to be remembered. And I felt like that we needed to do that then to make sure that it happened. And then the main thing was that I just felt like it was time to get them back together. It had been 20 years to get together as a group and get to talk about old times. And there was multitude of great times that year. You know, we tend to focus on how it ended, but there was a multitude of great times with those guys, and they need to come back and reminisce.
It was neat that somebody actually remembers, you know, and wants to go back and think about that time. And I was amazed, really, at the number of people that were there just to for that event.
When you walked out on court and they were talking about you guys, what was going through your head? Did you feel that same? Did you have that same feeling?
Oh yeah, yeah.
When
you know, and most of the guys I've kind of kept track of, and everybody's still fairly close and still friends, and it was fun to be out there on the court with all those guys again.
Makes you feel like you're there, but you're not forgotten, you know. People really, we appreciated it, man. It's just more than you can imagine. It makes you feel part of the town, you know. It makes you feel welcome and warm. It was great. It was really nice.
Looking back at the controversial call and at their lives now as they stood on court to the standing ovation of the entire gym, it was obvious. The team may have been the victims of a bad call and got a banner that read runner-up. Even after all these years, they were still heroes to the town. A team that still stands above the rest. A team that was selfless. A team that had a heart. A team that knew the meaning of hard work. A team that loved to play the game. It didn't matter what happened, because from the very day the team made their first points in their first game, to their families and everyone in the small town of Willow Springs, they were champions.